Hello, I'm Edmund Demarche with the Trends Journal. Thanks for watching. Today I'm with Professor Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran. Professor, thanks for joining.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's hard to keep up with developments between the U.S. and Iran. If you turn the TV off or internet off for 2 seconds, you're behind and you don't know what is happening. Yesterday, oil prices actually ticked lower because Iran said that there was progress made in negotiations between the U.S. and its own government. That changed after J.D. Vance went on Fox News and said Iran is not moving on the Trump red lines, which include the nuclear program, ending the nuclear program, putting caps on the ballistic missile programs, and ending any kind of support for allies in the region. Professor, now today, today's Wednesday, you have Axios reporting that a war between the U.S. and Iran is essentially imminent. What is going on? What's the whirlwind? Can you get us up to speed with what you're seeing things as?
Well, first of all, Trump's red lines are meaningless for Iran. Iran has sovereign rights, and Trump is not the world emperor. And he is, I think, in the view of Iranians, he's more like the pharaoh. And I don't think he's going to last very long, because if he does continue down this road, he is going to lose. He will lose this war. If there is war, he will lose this war. And with all that is going on in the United States and all the information that is coming out from the Epstein files and the other problems that exist in the country, he's not going to be able to carry the American people with him. So we don't know what will happen, but we do recall last time around when we had negotiations with the Trump regime. After the first round, there was progress. And the United States accepted Iran's right to enrichment. This is something that the chief U.S. negotiator, Witkoff, said on Fox News. And then in the second round, he began moving the goalposts. And between round 5 and 6 of the negotiations, the United States and the Israeli regime carried out a blitzkrieg war against Iran. So nothing that comes from Washington is reliable. No one in Iran trusts anything that Trump says, or that Witkoff says, or that Vance says. Doesn't matter. This is a regime that, for the Iranians, is completely unreliable. That is completely unreliable. The Iranians are obviously prepared for war. They are working 24 hours a day to strengthen their offensive capabilities as well as their defensive capabilities. And I think it's very important for Americans, your audience, and people elsewhere to recognize that this war would be very different from the 12-day war between Iran and the Israeli regime, which, of course, the Israeli regime ultimately sought a ceasefire to end, not Iran. But this war will take place in the most sensitive waterway on this planet. The oil and gas that is exported from the Persian Gulf region and from West Asia and the Caucasus in general are absolutely necessary for the global economy to continue functioning. The global economy is already in bad shape. The US economy is already in bad shape, as your journal reminds us regularly. But have no doubt that Iran will cut off all oil and gas permanently. And I posted a tweet today showing that how easy it is for Iran to take out the tankers and the ships that come and go through the Strait of Hormuz. They're literally hundreds of meters away from the Iranian coast on some occasions. There's nothing that the United States can do to stop Iran from destroying exports and imports. And the Arab dictatorships, the family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region, they all host U.S. bases. They'd be complicit in any war, so they have no reason to complain. And I think that these regimes will swiftly fall if there is war.
Iran.
So,
I'm sorry.
yeah, so we don't know what will happen. My belief is that if the United States had a sane leadership, there won't be a war, because it's not a war that the U.S. can win. But this is a leadership that is, for whatever reason, deeply influenced by the Israeli regime, and it is controlled by Israeli firsters, and so that makes the anything foolish to be possibly seen as reasonable from the viewpoint of such a White House.
The Iranians are negotiating. Clearly, if we're talking about it, they understand that. Doesn't it seem as though the Trump's main goal is regime change, and he won't stop at anything short than regime change in Iran? Clearly, this is not breaking news to the people of Iran. So when you're negotiating with an administration that wants to see a regime change and is laying that out, how do Iranians go about even negotiating that? Like they're negotiating not in good faith. Clearly, Iranians see that.
Well, I think that what we will see is regime change in Washington ultimately, not in Iran. And time will tell. But of course, the Iranians know that. But there are two reasons why the Iranians continue to negotiate. One is in case there is sanity, in case sanity prevails in the White House. You don't want to reject that possibility, no matter how remote it may be. But the bigger issue is that the Iranians want the world, and including the American audience, the American people, to see that we were negotiating and the US launched the war. That's exactly what happened during the 12-Day War. And that was one reason why, one reason why people across the world were so outraged at the United States, because the United States attacked Iran as Iran was negotiating. So Iran is negotiating both to see if there is a chance for a reasonable deal, but Iran is not going to accept anything that violates Iran's sovereignty. It's not going to accept limitations on its military capabilities, its regional alliances, or its right to have a peaceful nuclear program and to enrich uranium. That's just not going to happen. Iran is willing to do a nuclear deal where it gives assurances that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful. That we've done before, and we can do again. But that's as far as it will go.
There were recent military drills between Iran, China, and Russia in the region. Is there any significance to those drills, or is what kind of message was that to the U.S., if anything?
Well, those drills, I think, are going to take place shortly. They happen every year. Iran is not isolated. Iran has many friends across the world and across the region. And that is something that the Americans have to keep in mind, by the way. Not just the fact that Russia and China are much closer to Iran today than they were in the past, but also the fact that the resistance in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and probably elsewhere will join the fight. So the Americans are going to have to deal with massive Iranian missile and drone capabilities across the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean that will strike bases, that will strike ships, and that will destroy the oil and gas supplies permanently. And it will also have to deal with massive Iranian attacks against U.S. assets or anything linked to the U.S. or any U.S. interests. It doesn't have to be military. From its allies across the region. Trump lost his war against Yemen after 7 weeks. Yemen will be a part of this war. And Yemen today is stronger than back then. So you'll have multiple fronts, powerful entities the United States, the Trump regime, or the Epstein regime will not be able to manage such a war. None of us want war. We're not like Americans who are American elites who are warmongers. We've never started a war. When Saddam Hussein invaded our country in 1980, it was at the behest of the United States and the West. The West gave him chemical weapons and all sorts of weapons to use against Iranians and his own people. And we defended our sovereignty. The Israeli regime and the US and the Trump regime, they attacked Iran during a 12-day war. They were forced to back down. This will be a war for our survival. And our firepower is focused on the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. This will be a war of choice for the United States. So I think that the end result of this war will be a massive US defeat, and probably almost 100% certain that it will lead to the collapse of a number of family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region and the fall of Trump as US president.
Why are we pushing for a war? Why is the US pushing for a war to such a level right now? I read from someone, and I forgot the person's name, someone posted on X that Israel sees this as potentially it's the last and best chance to get the US completely on its side for a war, only because Trump is facing a midterm election in November that's not looking good for Republicans. And the idea is, even though Democrats also align themselves with Israel on these military actions, Israel will never have a president like Trump leading the way, leading the charge. Does that make sense to you, or do you see another reason why, we were told that the Iranian capabilities were obliterated not too long ago, but now we're back to going to war. No one's explaining it to the American people. We're just being told that red lines are being crossed by Iran. It's an amazing thing to watch unfold. Why do you think the push is right now?
Well, first of all, the United States is controlled by the Epstein class. And the Epstein class is Democratic and Republican. That's why there's no difference between them when there's war. There's no difference between the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Fox News and Breitbart. They're all the same. One is more bombastic, one is more sophisticated, but they're all the same. They try to demonize Iran, they demonize whatever country is independent of the United States, and prepare the ground for war. There could be multiple reasons. One is the Epstein files itself. Trump may feel he needs a distraction. It could be the fact that the Israeli regime feels that this is their last chance, not because of just the midterm elections, but because the Israeli regime is becoming so despised across the world and in the United States. And in future years, especially after the exposure that came with the release of 2% of the Epstein files, apparently, that is making the Israeli regime more toxic. And so in the coming years or months, it will probably be much more difficult for the Israeli regime to be able to force the United States to destroy its own interests for the sake of the regime. And of course, there is also something else, and it may be that Trump is gambling. He's hoping, and he is, of course, a gambler. He is hoping, possibly, that with his poll numbers so low and the situation so bad for him and his supporters, that if somehow he is able to win a war against Iran, that he can turn that around and win the midterm elections and stabilize his position. But I wouldn't bet on him winning this war.
Last question, Professor. I know it's very late out in Tehran. I thank you so much for joining us. Last question, and I know we've had this conversations before. Iran wants to be able to stand alone in its military capabilities and not rely on any regional ally or Russia or China. I spoke to, I believe it was Larry Johnson recently. He's a former CIA analyst from Sonar 21, and he said that Russia and China would not watch Iran fall, would not want to see Iran collapse, the government there. What do you, has your opinion changed at all on whether or not Moscow and Beijing would become participants if Iran found itself in an existential crisis because of the war, if it found itself on the losing end? Do you think Russia and China would sit by and watch?
Edmund, I do not believe at all that Iran will fall. I think it is very clear that while the United States can hurt Iran, the damage that Iran can do by destroying the markets is much greater than any damage that the United States can do. Iran will bring down the US economy, it will bring down the global economy, and the world will blame the United States because they started this war. Russia and China are close to Iran, they're friendly to Iran. They feel threatened by the outrageous and abnormal behavior of Trump. But Iran is a strong and powerful country, and the Iranian people are very resilient people. The Iranian nation is deeply influenced by the culture of Ashura, by Karbala, the grandson of the Prophet of Islam, Imam Hussein. That is deeply embedded in our culture. His stance against the oppressor and despot of his time in support of the oppressed and the downtrodden is something that is commemorated by almost all Iranians every year. So I think when the time comes, if the United States chooses to attack Iran, they will see that Trump will see very swiftly that Iran is more than prepared to enter a long-term war and to bring down the US economy and to destroy whatever assets and whatever interest the United States has across the region. And I think that ultimately what will happen if Trump chooses to go down this road is that the US empire will collapse, the US economy will collapse, and people across the United States, especially Trump supporters, those who continue to support him despite the Epstein files, despite the endless wars, despite the murder of white Americans by ICE agents, blonde white women and white nurses serving veterans, they will support him through thick and thin. But when they lose their jobs and when their businesses are lost, I think that they will be seeking out Trump and all those who were advocating for war in the mainstream media and among US senators and Congress people. I think the US government and Western elites are miscalculating big time. They always believe their nonsense about Iran being weak and the Iranian people being divided. The Iranians are very united. Iran is very strong, and Iranian allies across the region are strong. The reason why I stress on all this, Edmund, is because I want ordinary Americans to know that this is not going to end well for the United States. It's going to affect people on the streets. It's going to affect ordinary Iranians in a big way and very fast.
Professor Mohammad Marandi, thank you so much for joining the Trends Journal. Everyone, I'm going to have his X account listed below so you can follow him on X. Thank you, Professor.